Okay, so we are live on the website and live on YouTube, so we just have to wait for the rest of our members to get here. We'll be ready to go.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Hi, Rob, how are you?
Hello.
Hi, Rob.
Hello.
Hello, everybody.
And I did get an email just a minute ago from Chelsea. She has to do an unexpected pickup for one of her kids, so she's going to miss us. And I know Fred won't be able to make it either, but everyone else should be here.
I have my trusty Stead here to help us. So
Oh, perfect.
Cute.
If there's any big decisions, we know who we're turning to.
that's exactly right. Axel, tell us the answer.
That's right.
And Rosie's down below the table to help us too. So
Great.
how are you, Paul?
Good. How was your holiday season?
Very nice. Thank you very much. I hope yours was too.
Yeah, it was good. We got to spend a lot of time with family and friends, so it was much different than last year.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to see people without complete masks.
Yeah, well, my mom just recently moved back from Arizona. She was there for like 7 years, and so it was good to have one central location for my brother and my sister and their kids and all that kind of stuff. So
Excellent. Stephanie, did all your kids get what they wanted for Christmas?
Oh, and too much of it. They had a good Christmas.
I
It was good.
understand. And I'm sure that's the same for you, Jeff, right? Oh, he's muted.
Oh yeah, they got plenty of stuff for Christmas, that's for sure.
All right, and here's Tori joining us now.
I didn't hear from Erin. Did you, Emily?
I didn't, but we have a forum with Tori once he gets up and connected to audio, so we can go ahead and get started and hopefully Erin can catch up.
All right. I think it doesn't look like he's connecting anymore.
Hey guys, sorry I'm late.
Awesome.
Hi.
All right. Let's get started. All right. It is 5:35 p.m. on Thursday, January 13th. And I will call this meeting to order. I don't have a gavel. Otherwise I would gavel, but I don't. So Pamela, if you want to do roll call of our members.
Sure. Kate Murphy,
Here.
Fred Wolf, is absent. Rob Eber,
Yes.
Erin Gradinsky, absent. Stephanie Dahl,
Present.
Tori Leviton,
I'm here.
and Chelsea Scott is absent.
Perfect. And now we will do the Pledge of Allegiance.
We can actually skip Pledge of Allegiance. I apologize. We usually skip it for virtual, but
Fair enough. I was like, I don't remember doing it on the last virtual.
it's pretty clunky to do virtually. So,
All right. Emily, do we have any audience participation? From what I can see that you have on the screen, we do not have any audience
we don't have
participation.
anybody signed up, so we can go ahead and move to the consent agenda.
Perfect. Did everybody get an opportunity to review the minutes from November 11th, 2021 that were sent out in our packets?
Yes.
Nodding heads. Wonderful. Are there any additions or corrections?
I do not have any.
Nope.
Hearing none. Can I have a motion?
I
Move
move
to- Go ahead.
to approve the minutes from November 11th, 2021 for Parks, Trails and Recreation Commission.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained. All right. I don't think there's any unfinished business. Correct. All right. And we're going to switch a little bit from our agenda. I know we have Harriet Lemaire first, but we're actually going to do, Paul is going to present the master plan survey results first, and then we'll do the Highline Canal. So Paul, if you want to take it away.
I will. Let's see here. All right, so you all should be able to see my presentation at this point. Yep. Okay. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to Emily and the chair for inviting me to come do this. I really appreciate the opportunity to get to present to a different board. Just a little bit of background about me. I've been with the village for about 1.5 years now. Before that, I was with the town of Parker for 3.5 years, managing their development review staff and their processes. And then before that, I was with Commerce City for 9 years, doing a variety of planning and land use related stuff. So one of the reasons that I was particularly interested when this position came open is the chance to do the master plan. Master plan, I'm sure most of you know, but for those of you that don't, it is a long-range policy document that the city uses to make decisions on everything from capital improvement projects to land use applications. So it really does cover a whole wide swath of things. The city's current master plan was adopted in 2008 and has not been updated since then. And it's generally good practice to update your master plan every 5 to 10 years. Make sure that that master plan and that guiding vision is still in line with community desires and the community vision. And so that's the process we're going through now. So you may or may not be aware, and let me also say, I intend for this to be pretty informal. So if you have questions or thoughts or things as we go through these slides, please feel free to jump in. Don't feel like you have to wait to the end to do that kind of stuff. And Commissioner Eber, you're part of our Citizen Advisory Task Force. So if there's things that you want to add or things that you think may be particularly relevant you want me to discuss for this group, please feel free to jump in for that as well. So in order to undertake this type of effort, it is a pretty massive undertaking. And so we have hired a partner to do that, a consultant, and that is Rick Engineering. And I think their planning division is called Design, Rick Engineering and Design. But this is their project team, and Britt Palmberg, who's the second from the left, is our primary point of contact. And their group has been really instrumental in helping us sift through a lot of the feedback we've gotten so far from the open house and from the survey results, and our technical advisory group and the Citizen Advisory Task Force and all those folks. And then Rick Engineering has hired a sub-consultant, Felsberg, Holt, and Ulevig, FHU, for those of you that may be familiar with them. They're a transportation company and transportation engineering company, and their primary focus is helping us get through issues or things related to not only roadway traffic, but things like trail connections and bike connections and things of that nature. So that's kind of our project team. Where we are in this process, prior to the pandemic in 2020, a lot of background work was done related to community assessment and asking some stakeholders questions and that kind of stuff. And then post-pandemic, we've picked up in late 2021, we started with our open house and Citizen Advisory Task Force meetings. And so we've really moved into kind of more active engagement, I would call it. And so we've reached kind of the first layer of public input. And now it's time for us to take a lot of the information that we've heard and received and kind of translate that. What I will say is, per the city's charter, our Planning and Zoning Commission is charged with overseeing the master plan and the master plan update process. So that's the group that's making a lot of the critical decisions in terms of, what do these workshops look like, and how are they going to be structured? And for those of you that saw and took the community survey, they essentially wrote those questions. And so they've been very involved in this, and they will continue to be very involved in this. But it's the project is now transitioning more from, okay, here's what we've heard so far, and here's what we think we've heard, or we need more information on this or more information on that. That's kind of the second layer. And then the third layer is, okay, we gathered this information. We've asked you if what we heard or if we need more information. And then the third phase of it will be confirmation of, yes, this is the direction we want to go for these different topics. And the project's scheduled to conclude in the fall of this year. So one thing that has been important to the Planning and Zoning Commission so far is trying to create some consistency between the existing master plan document and the update. You'll see in some slides, including the Parks and Open Space one, what we've heard from a lot of the village residents is we like Cherry Hills Village and we like it the way that it is. So, we're not looking at wholesale 180-degree changes in these topics, but there's opportunity to update those, right? It's been 13, 14 years since the last one was adopted, and it's time to take a look at those. In that vein, the existing master plan doesn't really have formal chapters, if you will, but does have certain topics that it discusses. And so the two on the left in red, those are the two that will probably either be sprinkled throughout the rest of the chapters or go away. Just they've either been addressed or they fit better in the update, sprinkled throughout. And then the right-hand column is the potential chapters that Planning and Zoning Commission has identified so far, with the addition of a chapter related to sustainability. So I'm getting ready here in these next few slides to talk to you a little bit about some of the input we've had to date, and that's setting the stage for some of the key takeaways that we've identified. And I know a few of you were at our open house back in September. That was great. We've had some questions about, is that a lot of attendees? Is it not a lot of attendees? What I can tell you is that that's more than I would have expected, particularly coming off of a pandemic. And generally speaking, when you do these initial open houses for these types of projects, these projects tend to build momentum as you get going. And these initial open houses where we ask broad questions and try and get a wide net of information, those tend to be less attended than the future ones we have, where you start to give people choices and options and really kind of get into what direction are we headed here. We also, that same day in September, we opened a community survey. We mailed a copy of the survey to every property owner in the village. It's also available through the city's website and on our project website, chvillagevision.com. Through the course of that, we received over 460 surveys, which we were absolutely thrilled with. It was a great response to what we were hoping for. And not only did folks take the time to, click 1 through 5 or yes, no, or things like that, but we had a lot of really good feedback related to written comments. And in some ways, those are harder to quantify. And so that's what our consultant's been really working really hard on over these last few weeks, is to try and categorize or make those written comments digestible for the Planning and Zoning Commission. Additionally, we've had 2 meetings with our Citizen Advisory Task Force. As I mentioned, Commissioner Eber's on that. And that's a collection of folks that are residents here in the village. There's a couple former mayors on there. There's most of the members of the Planning and Zoning Commission are on there. There's several former council members that are on that. So a lot of good folks that have a lot of knowledge and background information on the village. Just FYI for you guys, former council person Scott Roswell is the chair of that committee, and he's been fantastic to work with. We've had 2 of those meetings. The first one, as I mentioned, was in September. We also had one in December, and then we're also scheduled to have one next Thursday, the 20th, if I'm not mistaken. That's the date.
Correct.
And then kind of the fourth approach to public input has been our technical advisory group. That's a group of stakeholders that have an interest in the village, but don't necessarily live in the village. So think of churches, schools, country clubs, water districts, the fire districts on that. So that's a collection of folks that have an interest in the village, but wouldn't necessarily be a resident here. We had a meeting with them back in December. I can tell you a few of them raised some issues that were pretty specific to them, but in general, the feedback was, we love the village, and the way it is today is part of the reason why we're here, why we want to stay here. So it's been consistent throughout that folks like the village the way that it is. And so I'm going to run through these next set of slides, and these slides are essentially the different chapters of the master plan per this Planning and Zoning Commission. And what they are is essentially interesting observations that we as staff and our consultant have made going through the survey information. I will say we had a Planning and Zoning Commission study session on Tuesday night where we went through a lot of the survey results, the work that the consultant had done. The Citizen Advisory Task Force received that information today in advance of their meeting next week. And so it's still going through a vetting process, if you will, but we feel confident about where we're at. And these interesting observations are not that far from what the survey results are. So I wouldn't expect any information here to change drastically. But when we ask folks about community character, some of the feedback we got, and I'm not going to run through each of these bullets ad nauseum. If there's things you want to talk about on the slides or bullets in particular, please feel free to ask questions. But what's been interesting, and I don't want to mischaracterize this.
All right.
No, that's fine. I don't want to mischaracterize this and represent that it's somehow a majority or a large minority, but there certainly has been some feedback about folks that get concerned or have concerns about folks creating these mega mansions and walling themselves off from other members of the community, really focusing themselves inward and not really being a part of the fabric of the community that is Cherry Hills Village. So I don't know if that will go anywhere. I don't know, that's part of what we need to continue to tease out, but it's certainly something that's been interesting to us. The other is the master plan uses a term semi-rural pretty frequently. I shouldn't say pretty frequently. It does use that term, and it doesn't necessarily give a good definition or description as to what that means. And so part of what Planning and Zoning Commission has directed as part of this process is to understand, one, do people still feel that way? And two, if they do, what does that mean to them? And based on our survey results, we got, as you would expect, we got everything from more of a rustic pastoral feel of the community to somewhere that some responses were, well, it's already changed and we're more upscale suburban than semi-rural. And so what we're finding is that the community character, based on the feedback we've received, is probably somewhere on that spectrum. And one of the things we need to do in our next round of public input is really get a better understanding from folks about what that means to them and how would you describe that, I guess, as best as I could put it. Related to land use. So we did ask a question in the survey and at the open house if folks were open to different types of residential or even non-residential. And I will tell you that overwhelmingly, there was very little support for anything other than a low density residential. So it's probably one of those things in the next open house where we're looking for more affirmation of what we think we heard, which is low density residential, and that's it. But I will say, as part of the land use, there was some responses related to preserving important view sheds and somehow acquiring potentially more open space, either acquiring more open space for the city or requiring more open space on private property. Open space in the sense of more either landscape area or natural area on individual properties. Transportation is an issue that we know we need additional feedback on. But I will say there's been this mantra, I don't know if that's fair to say, but this phrase of low and slow, whether we're talking about bikes or cars, is in the village low and slow. And so that's a thought and an idea that will probably permeate a lot of the second round of public input. Also, we had a lot of concerns about bike speeds and behavior, not only on the Highline Canal, but on roads and things of that nature as well. And then as for this particular board, there was some feedback about trying to get more trails and separation both on the trails for different user types. And then parks, trails, and open space. I know this will probably be particularly interesting for you all. One thing that did come through in the surveys is don't fix what's not broken. A lot of folks like the parks and the park structure here in the village. Most of the parks here, except for John Mead Park, are pretty passive in nature, and that was something that folks expressed support for. And really, one of the interesting things that we found is potentially trying to get more connections between those parks. Infrastructures and utilities, that's one where we know we need more input as well. For one, I think this is a big topic and it can get complicated, and you can start to use a lot of terms that folks don't understand. But there was some interest in using the Highline Canal for stormwater and water quality, which I think Harriet is on your agenda after me to talk a little bit about the Highline Conservancy and the good efforts they're doing. So there was some support with that. There was some openness to working with some stormwater facilities in order to upgrade them. But there was very little support for traditional community facilities, so like a senior center or a library or a community pool or things like that. A lot of that stuff folks just aren't interested in. My personal opinion is a lot of that is already on private property, and so folks don't have the same desire to have that publicly available as they would in some other communities. And then the new topic is sustainability. We didn't hear, so sustainability, again, this is one we're going to have to tease out more in the next round of public input, but we didn't hear things like, right, we want to do a carbon footprint audit or things like that, right? So it's probably a smaller scale than something like that, but there is interest in water conservation and managing stormwater and energy conservation and composting and recycling. What that means and what that looks like, we will need to flush out, like I said, but there's definitely some support in the community for different levels of sustainability. So what's up next for us is, like I mentioned, we have our CAT meeting next week. At that meeting, we're going to do some additional review of the survey results. Planning and Zoning Commission has started kicking around some high-level draft vision, overarching vision statement for the document, as well as some guiding principles. So those will probably be the three things we discuss with the CAT next week. We're going to have another study session with Planning and Zoning Commission at their February meeting, and that will be primarily to prep for the second open house, which will be sometime in late February or early March. That's going to be somewhat dependent on how things play out with this COVID and Omicron and things like that. Planning and Zoning Commission has expressed they do not want to do an online open house, which I support them in that effort. And so we'll see how things play out here in the next few weeks. That date could be subject to change, but like everybody, we're just doing the best we can when we can. And so that's really kind of it for me. Like I said, if you have any questions or if you want me to go back to some slide or whatever, I'm certainly available. But again, I just want to thank you for your interest in the opportunity to share kind of where we're at in this project.
Paul, the only thing that I would add real quick is that, we have a whole chapter that's sort of geared towards our commission right now, of open space. And I think the one take home that I have is that everybody is very, very interested in continuing to have our trails, have an expansion of the trails, even connections of the trails. And the environmental issues, both within how the city operates, as well as kind of getting a upgrade to environmental issues in the community, I think is really came forward as a result of the first process, as Paul already said there. So I think it kind of bodes well for what the importance of the work that we're doing.
I would concur with that. I think more so, right, the 2008 plan doesn't really talk about any kind of sustainability or green or environmentally friendly or much of that in any regard. And that's certainly something that's come through in the public feedback so far. Now, what that looks like and, action strategies and specific goals, we're not quite there yet, right? That's part of what we hope to get through as part of this next round of public input. But those topics are definitely issues that the community has let us know that is important to them.
Good, thanks.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments, feedback? This is wonderful, Paul. Thank you so much for doing this. It is greatly appreciated to walk us through kind of where you guys are at and what your next steps are. And I'm excited to see how the parks and trails kind of get weaved into all of this in our master plan and are continued to be improved. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. And if you all are interested, kind of as we get towards the end of this next round of public input, where we do start to identify some goals or action strategies or whatever, let me know and I'd be happy to coordinate with Emily to get on a future agenda.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you so much.
No, absolutely.
It's a lot of comprehensive study and there's so much data, and good luck trying to understand what's in the best interest of all of us, because we don't necessarily agree on everything. So much data though. Well done.
I appreciate that. And these efforts are always tricky because, to your point, right, there's over 6,000 residents that live in the village. 6,000 people aren't going to agree on everything. But that said, I think one of the things that came through pretty clear for us is we like the village. We don't want fundamental changes to the village. And I think if we keep that in mind as we look at some of these individual topics, I think most reasonable folks will be able to say, this is in keeping with the character of the village that I know. So.
Perfect. Thanks, Paul.
All right. Absolutely. Thanks for letting me crash your meeting.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Anytime.
Paul.
Thanks, Emily.
Awesome. And I see that we have Harriet now.
Yes. So hopefully she's all
Hi.
there.
Am
We
I
go.
working?
Hello.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't have any light. Hold on just a sec.
And Harriet, I wasn't sure if you had a PowerPoint or not. I made you a co-host in case you do. You'll be able to share your screen, but if not, no worries either way.
I just have a few things I wanted to share. Yeah.
Okay.
Don't want to keep you guys. Am I the last thing on the agenda?
No,
I have a lot of reports, so don't
Oh.
worry.
I'll
Don't
turn
worry
fast.
about
I
it.
got there too late. I think we're already all sick of Zoom again, aren't we? Well,
A little bit.
yeah, so I can share now.
You should be able to.
Yeah, so my name's Harriet Lemaire. I live at 16 Cherry Lane Drive, down the street from Commissioner Eber. And I'm the executive director of the Highline Canal Conservancy. And we are here tonight just to have a brief conversation with all of you about the plans that the Conservancy has been moving forward with regard to benches along the Highline Canal. So this is a long memo, but in essence, what we did when we worked on the plan for the Highline Canal is we did an inventory of all the existing benches along all the miles of the Highline Canal and did an assessment as to what would be a proper cadence of benches, which was about one bench every quarter mile or something around that amount. And then we looked at areas where, you know, people might want to have more benches so that they could have like a small gathering area or where there were beautiful views and so forth. And then did that analysis and presented it to the committee that Emily sits on, called the task team, to get feedback from the local jurisdictions on, you know, sort of their desires for the management of benches. Denver Water's given the Conservancy the authority to manage the benches along the Highline Canal. And as a nonprofit organization, you can imagine this is an important part of ongoing revenues, as it is for most organizations that support park activities. I noticed that in Denver, in the Denver parks, they recently turned their their bench management over to a new nonprofit called the Denver Parks Trust, so that the nonprofit can generate revenue. And it's something usually that local governments aren't that interested in doing because of the naming that goes on to the benches, okay? And so in Cherry Hills Village, I don't have the exact number of benches that you all have, and I bet you that Emily does, but there are generally these stone benches that you guys, I think, have adopted as a standard bench that you like. We're also recommending that Cherry Hills Village consider wood benches. That's a standard wood bench that you see in Greenwood Village. And so we're trying to somewhat unify, at least that if there's different types, at least the use of the same types in different areas. And so those two benches would be the types of benches that we'd recommend in Cherry Hills Village. And here's an ugly mug of a guy that you guys might know. And he is sitting on a bench, so to speak. And we have one of these in Cherry Hills right by where the bridge crosses from Dahlia Hollow that has a little plaque on it right about there. Have you guys ever seen that one? Yeah. Not Dahlia Hollow, excuse me, the Dahlia Bridge, you know, down there when you walk. As soon as if you go south, when you cross the bridge at the Dahlia parking area, trailhead, you'll see that little bench there. And that's something that we've been quite intrigued by because it's such a natural sort of thing. And the maintenance is zero. So maintenance considerations and sort of the respect for the local are why we've recommended these three types of benches in Cherry Hills Village. So the question today is not, you know, are you okay with the Conservancy managing benches? Because we've basically been given that authority already by Denver Water. But the question today is, do these types of benches, you know, do they feel good to you? Does that feel like what you all would expect to see along the Highline Canal in your jurisdiction? And then secondly, there are existing benches that were either installed by South Suburban Parks and Rec or by Cherry Hills Village as the years have gone on. And would you all want to turn those benches over to the management of the Conservancy, respecting the names that are already on those benches and reaching out to those folks as the benches perhaps disintegrate, you know, because you do see some not disintegrate, but fall apart, basically. So that's why we're here today, is to get feedback. And Emily wanted to ask you specifically about that. Emily, do you want to add here?
Trying to get my camera to work again.
Yeah.
I think just echoing what you said, Harriet, I think those are good questions for the commission to weigh in on. From our perspective, I think it makes for more consistency and continuity to have the Conservancy handle all the benches along the High Line. And we have been a little bit more hands-off with benches along the High Line over the past couple of years because we were in this state of transition with Denver Water, with all the jurisdictions. As the use of the canal changes and the treatment of the canal changes. So just to say that we're in favor of that step. But I'm interested to hear the commission's thoughts.
Can I ask you a question on that, Emily? How would we handle, I think it was probably 2 meetings ago, maybe, or 2 months ago, I don't know. Anyway, we were talking about benches and, naming trees and things like that. And so if somebody wants to remember a loved one or something of that nature, and so then they had the option of benches and trees and things like that. And so if we, for lack of a better term, outsource it to the Highline Canal Conservancy, are you all still handling the trees? How would that logistically work?
So everything that all of the benches and trees that are not along the High Line, we would continue to maintain, update, handle new donations. If they're not along the High Line, we're still running those programs. It's just benches. This is specifically benches just along the High Line Canal.
Perfect. So if somebody came to you and said, we want to do something on the High Line because it was very important or memorable for a loved one, then we would just refer them over to the High Line Canal Conservancy.
Yes.
Okay.
And from a staff perspective, that's a really nice thing because, the Conservancy is managing the plan for the whole canal. So then they can more easily be consistent with the cadence of benches and the style and everything else. Then we can, because a lot of times, over the past couple of years when people request benches along the High Line, we didn't have a great master plan to go off of. So we've been, holding off on those bench donations. So I think turning it over to the Conservancy would be very helpful.
Yeah, Denver Water was respecting the fact that we would want to use this as a way to sustain the organization, one means of, raising money. So they sort of put a halt on approval of most benches on the High Line Canal over the past 4 or 5 years, maybe more, Emily, 6.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say one other thing. The Conservancy would be maintaining all the benches that went on the High Line Canal. So I don't know what that means with this surface. Do you have to get a power washer out there or something?
Jeff's on the call and he can speak to that, but they're typically pretty low maintenance.
Good.
Every so often they crack, I think. Let me see if Jeff can weigh in here.
Yeah, they're very low maintenance.
Oh.
Sometimes, we have to go out and wash bird droppings or something off of them on occasion,
Yeah.
And then if a tree branch or something falls on them, of course, they'll probably break, but they're relatively cheap too to replace. So easy install.
This wood bench, the reason we chose this option is we find that people really do like benches with backs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Harriet,
Yeah.
is the wood natural wood or is it a decking material?
We would want to do a natural wood, a very dense, probably type of wood that's sustainable though.
Okay.
So that hasn't been spec'd out yet.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff, how many benches do we have currently along the High Line Canal?
Emily, do you have, the whole High Line?
No, just in Cherry Hills, I'm sorry.
Emily, do you have that in front of you?
I
Josh,
would have to pull our bench inventory.
I have.
Can't imagine that we have a whole lot on the canal.
No, I don't think you have that many. I feel like we identified, a number that need to be replaced that were replaced by South Suburban many years ago. And then a number of additional, I want to say something like maybe 20 with the replacements and the new ones. Emily, does that sound about right?
I am running through the list right now.
I can send
That's
it.
what it looks. Yeah, that's what it looks like. Sorry, these aren't I don't have a way to reorder these, so I'm literally counting. I would say
Okay.
about 20.
Yeah.
My only
So-
comment that I've got for you, Harriet,
Yeah.
is that because the canal is definitely a natural feel, both the wooden bench and the metal bench don't seem to me to fit, especially if we have to then go put concrete pads along the canal.
Yeah.
You know, it just seems like a much more natural place so that the stone ones, you know, I don't know if we can find a stone version that would be able to have some kind of a back on it. Because I do think people like to sit back and enjoy and look out at, especially at some of the vistas, and that,
Yeah.
you know, is not just sitting hunched over.
Mhm.
It really does make use of a back.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know whether or not, Emily, we looked at anything, or Jeff, we looked at anything for our benches that would even allow a backing on it and still use the stone version. But my gut reaction of, like I say, both the wooden and the metal is they just don't quite fit with the feel of the canal to me.
Yeah. So, Rob, there's a lot of benches that have this look along the canal already that are grayed out, you know. That one's all shiny and perfect looking, but there are a number of those already, and even in the village. And then we, as you see this little chart, trying to adapt to sort of the, you know, the flavor of the different communities. And those that would be recommended for the village were, you know, your existing stone bench, the wood bench, and the boulder seating, not the metal. But I don't know if there's a backed, like you're saying, a backed stone bench.
I do
Yeah.
like the seating boulders, I will say that.
Yeah, they're pretty cool.
Is it my turn to give some input? I actually don't love an idea of standardizing it. I do like the idea of like using all three. I think most of us don't like the metal. It's just not natural. The other three can go off as natural. The flat stone benches are extremely uncomfortable. The wooden, I tried. I'm like, oh, let's sit here at the vista. No, it's just prohibitively uncomfortable. So but I understand the durability, the low maintenance, and all that. I would like to see a mixture, kind of how it is already. I don't think it should just be every quarter mile wooden bench. I like there's a boulder there instead, or there's a stone one, and maybe somebody else likes it, or maybe they can bring a cozy cushion thing for their favorite stone bench. But I would like to see a variety, like kind of like we have now.
Do you all like the idea of trying to make seating out of some of the cottonwood stumps that are out on the canal? Yes, I'm seeing some heads. Emily, are you getting a full indication here or not?
Yeah, I think so. I think those are all head nods.
Okay, thanks. Well,
I think there are an
I
awful
feel the
lot of-
same way as a villager. I don't know, a lot of the other communities are like, no way, it's so much maintenance. And I think that that's something that would be pretty special in Cherry Hills. A couple of those,
So the last gift of the giving tree.
Yeah, if that one tree came down, you'd have to make a chair out of it.
Yeah.
Well, we can continue that discussion with you all too.
And just a quick update, we were a little bit off. I have 14 benches along the High Line in our inventory, which I'm also in the process of updating, but that's a better estimate, I think.
So different opinions on this stone bench, wood bench, and boulder. Everyone sounds like they like the boulders. Two different opinions on stone versus wood, but you guys like the backs. Mm-hmm.
I'm okay with them not backed, but I'm just thinking for longer term users who want to be there more than a few minutes, the ability to sit back and really enjoy a sunset, really enjoy a vista You know, I
Mhm.
think those type of things are enhanced a little bit.
Yeah.
I do think our existing stone benches almost allow for a little bit more of sort of tabletop surface game playing, you know, whether it's enjoying with kids and letting them play and color and things like that, than something that the slats on the wood bench, because your crayon's always going down into the middle, but you know, 6 in one, half dozen the other way. I spent a lot of time looking at benches for when we redid Mead Park. And I still believe that there are an incredible number of talented artists that could almost turn this into a, you know, if Tori wanted to talk about variety, you could commission a different look in lots of different places along the canal and have a lot of different artists doing benches.
Interesting
We-
perspective.
We've been very favorable, in favor of some, you know, artist driven benches. I would say that, you know, as we work through a staff team, that a lot of the staff from the local governments are very concerned about maintenance. But that's the reason why the Conservancy took on the concept of maintenance, because most jurisdictions wouldn't even have wanted any wood benches at all. You know, so we kind of have different, like I said, different environments in the different communities, but yeah, so I mean, one thing we could do too is, as benches are being planned for different areas along the canal, kind of come in with sort of a little cadence and diagram of what's going to go where to the commission, because I think you have a good pulse on what would be, you know, negatively received and what would be favorably received within the community. And the last thing we'd want to do is put, you know, 2 or 3 benches in a little area next to Blackmer where we know people want to see the vista, and then have the very Parks and Trails Committee feeling really uncomfortable with that choice for some reason, you know?
Well, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
One question I had for you, just for comparison purposes, is, you know, we're not competitors, but there are going to be 2 different entities. You can go to the village and buy a tree or a bench or a chair, you know, in the village for whatever the money was. And then similarly, you can do it on the canal. And I was just curious, you know, what is the pricing for a bench or naming rights of a chair on the canal? Because I do think they should be pretty close, and, you know,
They probably won't be, Rob. I know what you're saying. It feels like it should be, but because we're raising money from the bench program for the improvement of the entire canal, and Cherry
There'll be
Hills
more.
Village is such a beautiful section of the canal, it's probably going to be a location where a number of very large donors to the Conservancy get recognized. And but what we want to do is hold out a number of other bench locations in the villages and in some of these areas that people just love, that are more aligned with the pricing that you guys have for your benches. So more associated with just the cost of the installation of the bench and a small amount for overhead for the Conservancy. So we're looking, and I'm just being totally transparent, as sort of holding certain benches out for these really large donors that are going to be really paying a chunk of money for improvement of the canal in the northeast sections, and then holding others over time to be released after that campaign's over.
Can I ask a question in terms of,
Yeah.
right now, it feels like that if the city was approached about a bench on the canal, Emily, you all would handle that currently, correct?
What we've been doing over the past couple of years, well, more than 5 years, is just telling people we can't place benches along the High Line because Denver Water wasn't historically allowing it as we were in this transition time. So at this point, if someone were to approach us, we would start directing them to the Conservancy as this program gets underway.
And is there going to be, thank you, that answers that question. And then my follow-up question on that is there going to be any this is probably silly, but any preference given as a Cherry Hills resident if I want a space in Cherry Hills versus somebody who is a Denver, Greenwood Village resident who just thinks it's pretty and would like to put a spot there?
That's a good question. We've tried so hard to like treat the canal with value, no matter what section it is. Yet this is a reality, right? So I'm not, we haven't gotten that far. I don't have an answer to that. Seems like there should be.
Thanks, Harriet. I appreciate that.
Mhm.
The other, in terms of cadence, Harriet, that I notice is, there are going to be some areas that are natural people attractants. Right there, you mentioned at the end of Dahlia.
Oh, yeah.
I would imagine you could put 2 or 3 combinations very close there. And then other places, you might just have a single sole bench.
Right.
And there will be, I don't know, a number of places along the way that you can have a number of benches closer than even a quarter mile.
Yeah, for sure. I think another spot that I eye a lot that you probably many of you know is when you are at Dahlia Hollow and you walk across that bridge. If you go to the north or to the right, there's like a downed cottonwood upside down stump there.
Right.
And in areas where the canal turns pretty sharply like that, there tends to be a lot of land between the trail and the canal just because of the erosion, I think, and the movement of the canal, alignment. And so those areas suggest that might be like a little mini gathering spot, like you're saying, Rob.
Yeah.
So like I said, I'd like to come back to you guys with a little more detailed plan and work with you all on some of those locations because our staff doesn't know the canal like you guys do in that area. Yeah.
I guess that Harriet, that does bring up a question to me of, if you put 4 or 5 tables or 3 or 4 benches out there, and somebody says, that would be a great place to have a function of some kind.
Right.
Whether it's a birthday party for a small person or something. I'm assuming that the Highline Canal Association will be the one who will be dealing with people who want to reserve a spot or something. That won't be a city function.
Yeah, that's so far we don't have like any gathering spots recommended in Cherry Hills Village. There are in some other areas like Littleton, approved one by Lee Gulch. And so far the subject of reserving those hasn't come up, but we are as an organization charged with approval of events, but also, events on the canal, which are probably considered larger, right, Emily, in collaboration with Emily. So it'd be like both entities needed to approve.
Yes, and we haven't had any requests either to reserve a spot along the canal. All of the requests that we've gotten in the past 5 years have been, I want to have a walk or a run on the canal.
You probably would want to keep the gathering spots pretty mild, like you said, like 3 benches. So far, no picnic tables have been recommended in Cherry Hills. We were trying to respect sort of the desire of our community to keep it basically the way it is.
Mhm.
But you,
Oh, good.
yeah. So I think the decision you guys need to make is, I'm hearing you definitely want to be involved in the location and have another chance to touch this as it starts to move forward into a little more of a plan. And then secondly, the question of the existing benches, right, Emily? Isn't that what you wanted them to weigh in on?
Yeah, if anyone has any feedback on that, I mean, we're happy to hand those over to the Conservancy, but if you're all in agreement, that's great.
I'm fine with that.
I'm fine with that.
Two.
We won't be taking them down, we'll, like the really old ones that you see, what we'll need to do, those are put up by South Suburban. We'll have to reach out to South Suburban and get the contact information for the names on those and sort of, work through what's the next step as they get replaced. Yeah. And if they're not ruined, they'd be left up. Yeah. Okay,
Perfect.
well,
Thank you.
thanks, you guys. We really appreciate it. And like I said, we want to take a light touch with the canal, not change it too much.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Thanks, Harriet. Appreciate it.
Take care. Have a nice evening. Don't stay up too late.
You either. Thanks, Harriet. We'll have you back soon.
Okay, bye.
All right. Moving on to chair report. I don't have anything since our last meeting with the holidays and everything else. So we will go around and do our commissioner reports. So Commissioner Eber, you're at the top of my screen. Is there anything you would like to report on?
Only just to emphasize again, the comments that Paul made, I think there's still a whole lot of work to be done. And the master plan can really use a lot of input, specifically about what we want our parks and trails to look like. I thought it was one interesting comment that he made is the idea about open space with respect to even private properties is something that was held pretty strongly by the commenters. And so I do think that there is a significant new emphasis on environmental issues, whether it be energy sustainability or you cannot believe how many comments there were about we don't want McMansions anymore. That, open space is super important and it gives us an opportunity to draft a very strong message. And I think his comment that we need to stay involved in that. Other than that, I have no other report.
Perfect. Thank you, Commissioner Eber. Commissioner Levitin.
Yeah, I don't have too much to say either. Yeah, open space. I think we somehow, I don't know what the rights are of, like you said, mega mansions. And I don't know how to approach this to keep the community not infringe on their landowner rights, however, somehow get them to keep open space. And it's also important to me that some of that open space has some kind of unmanicured, natural, wild character, that's part of what semi-rural would mean. However, what does semi-rural means to us, what we decide it means to us? There is no actual clear-cut dictionary definition. And I'm so glad that Paul is working hard on that to kind of figure out what kind of consensus we can come to. I also need to go to city council possibly directly, but such a massive component of this is Kent, Denver. And they're the largest landowner, the largest lot in the city. And I don't know if we have a liaison with them, but so much of what we're talking about with transportation, with open spaces has to do with Kent, right in the middle of the city. And I don't really know how to approach that. So if any of you guys have any great ideas, I would love to hear them. If not, I'll probably see if city council has any ideas, but we can't just totally ignore the entity of Kent when they are right in the middle. They're on the High Line, parts of it on the High Line. They're talking about dark skies and open spaces and recreation, to just like pretend they're not there. Like, I don't know how we can make a liaison to communicate with them better and see how we can have shared goals and shared values. So I'll keep working on that, and that's all I can add.
Lori, if I can just jump in real quick, I'd encourage you before you go to council to email Paul Workman and ask him, because I know that as part of the master plan process, they were identifying key stakeholders, and I'm fairly sure that Kent was one of them. So it's very possible he's having direct conversations with them already, that maybe you could get involved that way.
Okay. Thanks for that recommendation.
Perfect. Commissioner Murphy?
First of all, I'm not quite following what Tori was trying to say regarding Kent Denver. I feel like Kent is my kids go there. I feel like Kent is an incredibly gracious neighbor in terms of sharing their open spaces, allowing people to walk on their property. I mean, I don't know of any other school that allows such an open border, if you will, in today's world where, there's active shooters on schools' properties and whatnot. I mean, a lot of schools are very privately held pieces of property, and Kent is very much, I feel like they are the most gracious neighbor that Cherry Hills Village could possibly have. So I'd love to hear what you're referring to there.
It's more of a vagueness. I just don't know if there's transparency or if there should be or there needs to be. This is hardly a like put down on Kent. It was more of a, I want to understand our city's relationship with Kent more, considering personally how close I am and publicly how it really is like dead center of the village. So that I just would like to understand more, and I hopefully will. And maybe Paul has something to say on that as well. So sorry if you were misled with that.
No, it's fine. Because I feel like Kent, was incredibly good with even Quincy Farm, when Quincy Farm needed a parking lot for people to go for the open house of Quincy Farm, to be able to go park there in their dining hall parking lot and walk the High Line a quarter of a mile to reach Quincy Farm, or whether it be, I see people, taking their horses across the property, or walking the High Line, but coming off the High Line and entering onto Kent Denver's, open acreage and crossing over to a different part to cut the corner of the High Line. And I feel like Kent is a very good neighbor. And, doesn't, we don't have lights in our fields, because that goes against Cherry Hills Village, rules and regulations on lights. And so we can't have games that are after hours and whatnot. And I feel like we're a pretty good neighbor for Cherry Hills Village. So I'm going to leave it at that. And my other issue is I'm still really bothered by the corner of Quincy and Franklin. And I don't know how in the hell that passed, where somebody could just come in and knock down 36 trees and leave tree stumps for all of us to look at on a daily basis. And at what point does a property have to be developed when they go in and just do a vast, tree knockdown, and if you will, and then not have to, replant, rebuild? Like, is there a time frame for that?
So just jumping back to echo, Kate, what you just said in the beginning, Tori, I just want to let you know from a park staff perspective, I couldn't agree more with what Kate said. Kent has let us use their parking lot for Quincy Farm for our own events. I know they've let the Cherry Hills Land Preserve use their parking lot when they're having events at Quincy Farm, and they're extremely easy to work with. We've also gone over as part of the 75th anniversary celebration and gone through Kent's archives with them to get historical information about the city. So from park staff's perspective, Kent Denver is a great partner to the city, and I have no complaints, certainly. Kate, I apologize, but I don't know the answer to your question. I know that Paul Workman, if he was still here, he could answer it in community development, and that is a property that they've been working with and keeping a close eye on, because a lot of people in the community have echoed your sentiments that it's really frustrating to see that happen and then not have anything happen. So why don't I go ahead and reach out to Paul tomorrow and see if I can get an answer from him about that building permit process that I can forward along to PTRC.
I appreciate that, Emily, because I feel like there has to be something with along the, and that has nothing to do with you. And this is way beyond your scope of job description, but there needs to be, in my opinion, a time frame that when you get a building permit and you go in and you just wipe down 36 trees and leave stumps, and there's no sign of any building there. And I just wonder, no, like, at what point is there going to be, there's, to me, there needs to be, from the point when you chop down a tree, you have X number of months before you start breaking ground, and there's no sign of that. And it's so disturbing. And so it kills me to see it. And I feel like, we really need to implement some sort of policy where for every tree you knock down, granted, they would never be able to replace the size of those trees. So, at the very least, when you knock down one ginormous tree, you got to put up 3 mid-sized trees to, it kills me to see what just went down. And that's not just that property either. It's other places in the village, and trees are so incredibly valuable, and a tree like that just doesn't, that takes hundreds of years to grow. So.
Yeah, and we do have a tree replacement policy. I can send you that in the code. I just don't know what the timeline, I don't know that there's a specific timeline attached, how that timeline works with the building permit, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So I'll get more information from Paul and send you the tree replacement policy also.
Okay, thank you. And on a different note, your hair looks beautiful.
Thank you.
It's really grown.
It's very long, yes.
I love it. That's great. Okay, perfect. I don't think I missed anybody else. Emily, do you want to give staff reports?
I'm actually going to turn it over to Jeff to give the first one about the trail renaming.
So I've been working with Fred Wolf, and we have all the signs in for the Woody Hollow Trail, and they're all up and everything's in perfect shape for that. And we're currently working I'm working with him on the Cherry Trail, which runs from like Bridle Path Lane off of University to Glenmore. And that's our next one. And then we're going to sit down and meet and talk about what his plans are for like the Glenmore Trail and moving forward with the naming of the other trails. So that's kind of where we're at. We're moving along.
Perfect. Thanks, Jeff.
Yep.
And then for Quincy Farm, City Council approved the memorandum of understanding with the Cherry Hills Land Preserve back in December. So under that MOU, the Cherry Hills Land Preserve is really going to be driving the process with obviously a lot of help and input from city staff. So we'll be meeting at least on a monthly basis as the Land Preserve puts together a plan for next year at Quincy Farm. So really 2023. And they will wrap that plan up in July every year, according to the MOU, and we'll present that to City Council for approval. And that plan every year will contain, especially in the beginning, probably baby steps of things to do at the farm. Whether it's just adding a little garden on the east side or, larger capital improvements. Maybe it's adding an ADA compliant restroom on the east side, that type of thing, so that moving forward, we'll be able to look ahead at the next year. The city will be able to budget what we might need to contribute. We can work together with the Land Preserve to apply for grants and kind of know what's coming and have it be this organic process that's really driven by the programming that the Land Preserve is doing at the time, rather than an overarching master plan like we were working on a couple of years ago. So that's an exciting process. I think it'll be a good fresh start for the farm. The tree donation program, I'll just be updating City Council that we're now accepting trees as another option along with benches. It does not need to go through the whole City Council approval process that we were anticipating. So basically that program is up and running as of now. And then the last item is that park staff and the police department will be giving City Council kind of a status update about e-bikes at the February 15th council meeting during the study session. So it's not something, we're not bringing forward new policy. We're not changing anything. This is really a chance to update city council about especially some of the challenges about enforcement from the police department's perspective, and some possible solutions, especially around speeding. Maybe not solutions, but tactics that we can use going forward. I'm not going to promise that we can solve the issue of anyone speeding. So I encourage you to watch that meeting. We have another meeting before that one, so I'll be able to update you with more details. And it will be recorded and on the website too. So if you can't watch it live, that'll be available afterward.
Emily, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
While it's a question about what we can do about speeding, that assumes again that they are okay to be there, and it's a question of pace. The policy that we currently have is they're not to be there. So I would like to say that the question isn't how do we address speeding? The question is how do we address having them at all?
So when I say speeding, it's not referring to just e-bikes. It is speeding of
With even pedal bikes.
road bikes, yeah, of just a standard, mountain bike, road bike, fat bikes, whatever the case may be, speeding across the board.
Right. But I would like to hear what the police say about our ability to meet our current regs, which says we are not going to have e-bikes on our trail system, because that is a very difficult enforcement issue, but yet, and it's a great one of great consternation to many people who are on our trail system when they do find somebody using an e-bike, especially if they're going fast. But I do think we need to find a way to enforce that if we're going to have it. And so that's something with the police. But I think it goes also to a little bit of the question that I would like, I think this came up in a couple meetings ago, where when I was on the citizen task force or whatever it's called, for the master plan, the police were saying that our signs were too little, but here at PTRC, we had run it through everybody, and the sign saying no e-bikes was cleared supposedly by the police department, saying that it was big enough to put people on notice. And now I'm not sure if we've got a conflict about that. So
No, so I apologize if I gave that impression, but the police don't approve our small signs or any of the trail signs because they're not being used. That's not, so that no e-bike sign isn't, there's no regulation that says if you have a no e-bike sign, it has to be a certain size and it has to meet these standards. So it's not, go ahead.
no, what I was hearing though from the police department that night at the other meeting was they don't feel our signs adequately put people on notice to the point that they can enforce that no e-bike requirement. Now, I don't know if that's true. I don't know if it's false, but that's what was said. And if it is that we need to have bigger signs, then we at PTRC, who has approved those signs, need to come back and reevaluate that sign and see if it should be bigger as to the e-bike notice.
So the chief will address all of these concerns at the February 15th meeting. So I'd encourage you to just tune into that.
Okay.
Perfect. Anything else, Emily?
That's all I have.
All right. Anything else from anybody before I adjourn the meeting?
I would just like to remind everybody that the deadline for recreation reimbursement is the 15th, which is Saturday. So you can email those to me or drop them off. But if you do want to submit for reimbursement, just make sure I have it by Saturday.
Thank you for the wonderful reminder, because it wouldn't have been to you and now it will be.
Perfect. Thanks, Pamela.
Thanks, Pamela.
You're welcome.
All right. If there's nothing else, it is 6:46 p.m. and this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
everybody.
Take care,
Have a good night.
everyone.
Thank you.